Did God lie in Genesis chapter 2, verse 17? Some skeptics of the Bible state that God lied in Genesis chapter 2, verse 17. The claim is that God tells Adam that he will die if he eats from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Skeptics will then claim the serpent tells the truth to Adam and Eve while God lies. This particular passage of Satan telling them the truth is tried to be supported by Genesis chapter 3, verse 4 and 5. The serpent says, "You will not die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." End quote. Now, I think there's a few ways to kind of parse this out. One interpretation is that God in Genesis chapter 2, verse 17, is speaking more so hyperbolically. This is actually a view that's supported by scholars such as Dan McClellan, the Mormon scholar that puts out a lot of really interesting content. Dan states that the author of Genesis was using a literary device of hyperbole, as mentioned, to emphasize the seriousness of the matter of eating from the tree. Dan uses an analogy to explain, and it goes something of this sort. Take, for example, where you and your child are in Walmart or anywhere of such an idea, and you're shopping, and your kid runs away from you to get a toy or whatever it is. You say out loud, "When I find him, I'm going to kill him." You do not literally mean that you will kill him, but you're just showing the seriousness of the situation. Obviously being a parent worried that someone may take him or whatever it may be. Now, this is a perfectly plausible view when you're looking at Genesis chapter 2 and Genesis chapter 3 and trying to explain what these passages really mean. I don't have any issue with that view. I think Dan's view is extremely plausible, and I actually kind of hold to this view. But there are some other scholarly works that don't think Dan is correct. But this view, though, Dan does think that God did lie in this passage. At the very least, even if he doesn't lie in this passage, Dan thinks that God lies in other passages. But one scholar that is a differing opinion than Dan would be John Walton. He's written many books. He has the Lost World books, the Lost World of Genesis 1, the Lost World of Adam and Eve. He's put out a lot of those kind of books, if anybody would want to check him out. But he disagrees with Dan. John Walton's view of the phrase, quote, "you will surely die," end quote, is about the relationship between God and mankind changing, or God and Adam and Eve changing. Humans lose access to the tree of life in Eden as they are exiled by spiritual beings called cherubim, as these are throne guardians. On such a view, Adam and Eve died, not physically, but died by being exiled from God's presence, as they are to toil the ground, and obviously the suffering was intertwined with their lives now. John Walton sees the serpent as really disregarding the warning. John Walton also says that the way the Hebrew reads in Genesis 2:17, that we can interpret the latter as "you shall be doomed to die," rather than "you will die." He argues that the Hebrew phrase is an absolute infinitive combined with a finite verb of the same root, which would translate the passage again, "and the day you eat of it, you will be doomed to die." So Eve in Genesis 3:3, almost confusingly, states that they will die right after eating. So the serpent, just like Eve, changes the words of God from Genesis 2:17. So Eve and the serpent don't even quote God correctly. So, to another point, some don't even think the serpent of Genesis is the Satan that we all come to understand in the New Testament. That's obviously content for a different video. But if any of you are interested in such a video, let me know down below and I can do something on that. But these are two views that I think are both extremely plausible. I like Dan's view, but I'm not opposed to John Walton's view either. Dan is more critical of the Bible, obviously, in comparison to guys like John. But I find his content quite well. I don't think it's derogatory in any sense. But definitely check either of these two scholars out. I think they're all really good to learn from, to kind of understand these basic passages. But to conclude, I don't think either of these interpretations support the idea that God lied in the way that Dan still thinks, and other scholars say that he did. I don't think that that's supported at all. This was a pretty heavy thing from people that kind of go into the Gnostic views today. Even just the lay people today like to go into this view that God was the liar and Satan was the good guy. And this is why I mentioned the Gnostic stuff, because there were some Gnostics that held such a view that, the material world is bad, God created the material world, so God is bad, Yahweh is bad, and Satan is the good guy in the story. And there are many people that kind of take this like Gnostic view, and that's why I think they try to support this view of Satan being the one telling the truth and God being the liar. So I think that's why we still see this view today, and that's why I think it's important to continue to address these kinds of things. And whether or not you think these two explanations are satisfactory, there's tons of other literature on it too that can be referenced. But I think either of these two views are perfectly plausible put forth of these passages. So thank you all for watching. Like and subscribe for more content like this, and let me know what you guys think down below about this passage.